and Studs! This is Sprues and Studs, and welcome in on to another painting tutorial. This time we're going to be painting the Blood Angels Death Company Dreadnought, and I'm going to be walking through you step by step how to do it. So right now we are actually going to be edge highlighting the foot of the Dreadnought using Dawnstone. So you'll hear me say over and over again, in order to properly edge highlight, you're not going to be using the edge of your paintbrush rather than the tip of your paintbrush. By using the edge of your paintbrush, you're able to pick out the raised edges, and you can achieve really clean lines by doing that. Speaking of clean lines, sometimes, unfortunately, those lines bleed over, and thankfully with painting, you could always go back and try to cover these issues up. So this is also assuming that you've also base coated your Dreadnought with Chaos Black, and then I hit it with another coat of Abaddon Black, because I like the color of Abaddon Black a little bit more because it has more of, I don't know if you can say like a richer tone of black, if that makes any sense to you. So right now we're going to be using Lead Belcher to paint the skull of on the shin armor plate of the Dreadnought. There's really nothing much to say except make sure you have, well, basically what Duncan Rhodes says, 2 thin coats on it. Now to get a little bit more depth of flavor, we're going to be using Nuln Oil to shade the skull, and there's really nothing much to say more about it. Next we are going to be painting the Red Death Company X, and as you are painting a lighter color on top of a darker color, it's probably going to take a few more coats than 2. I find that every single time that I do these kind of things, you have to put at least like probably 3 coats on it. And next thing we're going to do is be highlighting the skull. I usually use Stormhost Silver, and again, using the basics of highlighting, use the edge of your paintbrush to pick up, well, the edges of the skull. Moving on, we will be using Reikland Flesh Shade to basically shade all the pipes and the other things that I've painted Retributor armor, and this is a typical wash that you would use to paint or give more depth to Retributor armor. And one of the things that I'm going to tell you is, before you start painting, you should always have a kind of game plan of how you want to paint your model and test how it's going to be, or how the colors are going to look, because obviously I went and did this beforehand and had an idea of what was going on. Now we're going to be attaching the lower body to the feet and to give the Dreadnought something to stand on. So far, so good. Next, we're going to be moving on to the meat and potatoes of the build, which is the upper body of the Dreadnought. And again, with the Red X, as it is a lighter color on a darker color, you're going to need to probably hit it up with at least 3 coats is what I typically found. There's a red X also in the middle of the sarcophagus, as well as other reds that you will need to pick up on this particular model, as you can see right here. And lo and behold, again, what do you see? Lead Belcher, my favorite dark silver paint. Again, as I said to you before, it always is good to have a game plan of how you want to paint these models. So you want to also be cohesive and uniform, so all skulls on this particular model is going to be painted a Lead Belcher or the silver, because like I said, uniformity is very important on the model. Alright, moving forward and moving on, we are going to be painting the wings on the sarcophagus, the pipes, and the halo on the right hand side of the Dreadnought Retributor armor. And again, as I said to you before, it is always good to be uniform with everything. So everything on this model that you see, the pipes, the wings, the halos, are all painted Retributor armor, regardless of whether they are on the body or on the shin or wherever you find it. Blood for the Blood God. Yep, we're going to be painting some banners. There's actually only 2 of them, I believe, on this particular model, Corn Red. And I actually like Corn Red because it's got more of a richer, well, bloodier tone, much like how it's supposed to be to worship the Blood God. So I thought that was pretty fitting to put it on a Blood Angels Dreadnought. And like I said, I really like the color. As you can see, also, I'm being a little bit sloppy, not really keeping within the lines. I don't know, I guess I wasn't feeling very tidy at that point in time when I was painting it. So again, nice thing about painting is you can always go back and cover up those issues and messes in the background. I didn't actually show that in this particular video because you don't need to see me doing that. Wash, rinse, and repeat. We are going to be shading the gold on the body with Reikland Flesh Shade. Again, as you can see over there, the shade pools into the darker recesses, or not really darker recesses, creates darker recesses, so you can have more depth when you're looking at the model. And moving on with the Balthazar Gold, I'm going to be painting the sarcophagus with this. This may be a little bit controversial to a lot of people, mainly because maybe the Balthazar Gold does not have a lot of contrast to the rest of the gold that's on the model. I decided to do this mainly because I already have a second, or actually first, Death Company Dreadnought that I painted, more of a standard color, so that's why I wanted to go with something like that. Now we're moving on to painting lenses, and this is a really quick way of doing it. I usually use Stormhost Silver to basically put the base coat of the lenses, and then with the advent of the what was it called? Oh yeah, contrast paints that was created maybe a year or two ago. You're able to actually put the contrast paint on top of the silver, and it gives the lens a sort of a metallic look and color. Looks like I jumped the gun on this one. Looks like we're actually going to be shading the banners with Flesh Tearers Red to give the banners a little bit more depth of flavor. Next, we're going to be using Agrax Earthshade, which is a very darker tone, to shade the sarcophagus to give, again, more depth, more flavor to what you are seeing right now. Again, you need to make sure that the Agrax Earthshade is not going to be bleeding on top of areas in which you have painted the gold, which is the Retributor armor, because it's going to make it look a heck of a lot more dirty. Finally, moving on, we're going to be shading the skulls and the silver parts with my favorite wash, which is Nuln Oil. And it goes without saying, since it's a dark wash, we need to try to keep the wash from pooling into areas in which it's not supposed to be, or else you're going to have to redo the painting all over again. Notice how the wash is pooling nicely in the eye sockets of the skull, and this is a completely an effortless thing. Okay, here we go. This is what I'm talking about, using Warp Lightning and Blood Angels Red to colorize the lenses. And as you can see here, I've already colorized the lenses at the bottom of the Dreadnought, and you can see that slight silver undertone. And so this is a very quick way of doing lenses. I know there's a legit way of doing it using just regular paints. I just do this because I just don't have time and it's quick to do it. And now we are going to be using Auric Gold. Where's it? Armor. I can't remember which one it was. It just flashed on the screen too. To pick up the raised edges of the various gold parts, because we have put Reikland Flesh Shade on the gold, you now need to bring up the raised areas so it will have more pop, obviously, because if you just leave the shade, it will just look very flat and boring. Moving on, Stormhost Silver, again, with painting out the edges of the raised areas on the chalice, as well as the various skulls. Another thing I like to do with Stormhost Silver is actually paint up the upper ridges of the gold parts, because if you're looking at gold shine, there's actually a very, very pinpoint area which is actually super, super bright in silver. So now we're going to be highlighting the banners with Mephiston Red, and this is the red color that is one further lighter than Corn Red, so that's why we're using it right now. Again, pick up the raised edges with the edge of your paintbrush rather than using the tip of it. Sometimes you'll need to use the tip, but I highly encourage you to use the edge of your paintbrush to actually achieve this effect. And Evil Sun Scarlet is the one color that is one step above the red, so I wanted to give the banners a lot more pop, so that's why I did that. Now we need to pick up the raised areas of the sarcophagus, and we use Hashnut Copper to do this, and this is the color that is one lighter than Balthazar Gold, in my opinion. So that's why we're using it right now to, well, again, give the model a little bit more pop and flavor. Phew, we are almost done with the front of the body. I know it's been a little bit, but all this hard work and effort is going to pay off. I just also wanted to take this time to tell you to please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more Warhammer 40k painting tutorials. Now moving on, we are going to be painting the power plant Retributor armor, and again we're going to be following the same principles of trying to plan what color we're going to paint these ahead of time, and then with the Retributor armor we're going to be hitting that up with a Reichland flesh shade, and this is going to be a rinse repeat thing that you're going to find on this model in probably subsequent painting tutorials ahead. So going back to it, I believe I told everybody that I was going to do a painting tutorial at least once a month, and I'm still going to be doing that. The reason why I do not do more painting tutorials is because, well, they are super time consuming in terms to, well, basically paint the model and then shoot all the footage for it, and then most importantly to edit all the footage for it. It takes a long time. I believe the total build time for this and painting time for this particular model, because it takes me so long to paint, is roughly around, I believe it's like 12 hours or something like that. And it's hard to believe that through the magic of editing that we can compress 12 hours down to a mere 22 minutes, because if I did a full build or paint video, I think you guys would probably pass out of boredom. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about these sort of painting tutorials. Are they super helpful? Do you want me to highlight various parts a little bit more? I just want to hear your input, so please leave a comment in the section below, because I really like to engage with you guys and want to know more of what you want to see and more of what you don't. So in order to save time on this video, I did not bother showing you how to paint the arms. It just follows the same painting schematic that I have highlighted to you before. Now this is going to be a complete new thing for me right here. We are going to be wet blending a particular area. This time it's the blood talons on the particular model. And by wet blending, you are able to achieve a more smooth gradient as you are progressing from one color to another. Like I said, I've never done this before. This is the first time me doing it, so the results aren't that great, but it definitely looks a heck of a lot better than what I did before, which was just, well, not blending the areas together. What you need to do also before you wet blend is you need to put the two base colors that you want to blend together next to each other. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. So you have the Teclis blue at the bottom, which is the darker blue, and then the Lothern blue at the top. What you need to also do for a wet blend is to have a wet palette. The wet palette helps keep your paint wetter for longer. So what I'm doing right now is I'm taking a wet Teclis blue and brushing that over the original boundary. Then what I'm going to be doing next is going to be taking the Lothern blue and taking that and blending it back into the areas that I've painted with the Teclis blue, and doing this back and forth, so you can actually achieve that particular gradient. There's a bunch of YouTube painting tutorials on how to wet blend properly, and you can see right now the results of the wet blending are actually quite good. I was very impressed with just how beautiful the things were blended together. Now you may be asking, what is the lighter color that I'm using? That is actually Blue Horror, and by using the same principle of taking the Lothern blue, pushing that wet paint above the original line where the Blue Horror was, and then taking the Blue Horror and pushing it down into the area of the Lothern blue, is where you're able to achieve that particular gradient that you would want. And I'm going through and blending and blending and blending, and the results again are actually quite good for me doing it for the first time. As you can see here, I'm trying to show you the difference between what it looks like to properly blend. You have like this smooth gradient that you see up there with the blended blood talon, and then with one that are not, it just, there's no gradient, it just stops right there. So I think that I'm going to be incorporating wet blending in a lot of the models that I'm going to be doing in the future. So now you can see the full effects of the wet blending. I was actually, again, amazed on how good that looks. Man, we are getting pretty close to finishing the model right now. So far, it looks absolutely fantastic, if I do say so myself. Moving on, we are going to be painting heat burn on the flamers as well as the melt-a-gun on this particular model. And what technique that you're using right now is kind of stippling, which is like having your paintbrush loaded with a bunch of shade and then dabbing the shade repeatedly on the model over and over again. I use Drakenhof Nightshade and then move on to Druchii Violet, and then finally my favorite wash, Nun Oil, to achieve the effects of this particular technique. Now, heat burn is one of those things in which you don't really have to do on the model. I learned actually doing this probably like a year or two ago, and what I found was adding this particular, I guess, flavor to the particular weapon definitely adds more character to it, because after repeated use over and over again, you know the metal is going to warp and discolor or whatever. So it really gives a realistic feel of how these models are supposed to look in the grim darkness of the future when there's only war. And I really like it. If you just left it the way it was with the Retributor armor and highlighted it, it looks too clean, I suppose. And that's not exactly how, you know, these dreadnoughts are supposed to be. They're supposed to be well worn, well used, resurrected every single time for battle. So you want to see them be weathered, be aged. So that's exactly what I do on these models going forward. So what do you guys think of my painting skills? I really would like to know. Again, leave a comment in the section below. I've been painting for, I don't know, geez, it's been roughly like more than 10 years, and I'll have to say that every single time I paint, I like to challenge myself with something different and a technique that I've not used before. With the advent of YouTube, it's just been absolutely amazing, to be honest, being able to see all these different techniques and have them literally at the palm of your hand. Because back in the day when I was painting these things as a teenager, you would just, somehow be able to pick up these things from like a pro painter in person and in live. And to be honest, when I was painting stuff back in the day, I did not know what dry brushing was. Did not know what wet blending was. I didn't even know what highlighting as well as shading was, which is the basic thing of how to make these models pop. And that's the beauty of the internet these days. You're able to just see everything at your fingertips to make your models pop so much better. So my technique has improved over and over again through the course of the years. Whew, good Lord, we are almost done here. Right now we're going to be painting the base of the model, and the base is the thing that you need to do to make the model be uniform with the rest of your entire army. So you have to plan way ahead of time what your army wants to look like, because as I said before early on this video, that you need to make things uniform. You don't want to have a base color that is, you know, dark brown and then have another character model that is, I don't know, lighter brown. It just doesn't look right. One of the cooler paints, and I don't really know if it's called a paint, but regardless, let's just say it's a paint, that I discovered when I got back into the hobby was these textured paints. The cool thing about them is that once you put it on the base or anything that you paint, it literally gives a texture when it dries. So for a Growlin' Earth, when it dries, it gives a kind of a dry, cracked earth kind of look to it. And that's what the texture looks like. It looks like a very thick and gloppy. Because you're slopping on such thick coats, I'll let you know a little technique that I use to try to dry that. That little technique I use, to be honest, is to actually put the particular model or whatever base it is in front of a space heater. And by putting it in front of a space heater, you can make that particular area dry within minutes. So it is a big time saver to actually do that. Finally, we are going to be highlighting the base, specifically dry brushing. So with dry brushing, you want to dip your particular paintbrush in the pot and then have a paper towel and gently remove most of the paint actually from the brush. And you're going to be doing this with back and forth strokes. And after you're done with that, you're going to be basically brushing it back and forth along the edges of the raised areas, and you're going to repeat this over and over again. Finally, I like to give the base more character, and I like putting grass on the base because it makes your models stand and pop out. And plus, by putting grass, you can actually blend out or cover up areas in which you don't want to paint. So for example, there were areas here that actually had a skull on the base. I was too lazy to actually paint that because, well, I don't really like painting bases in all honesty. So I used grass to cover up these areas. And as you see here, ridges, crevices, whatnot is completely covered up and you can't tell anymore. Moving on, I wanted to add battle damage to a Dreadnought because, well, a Dreadnought probably has been through a crap ton of battles before. And you do that by taking a sponge and actually dipping it into lead belcher is what I did this time, and then trying to get rid of as much as the paint as you can, and then repeatedly go over the raised edged areas and dabbing the particular sponge over and over again. Oh man, and there we have it, folks, the full build of the Dreadnought. As you can see here, it is, in my opinion, quite a beautiful looking model and ready to purge for the Emperor. So this is Sprues and Studs. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next build or painting tutorial.